In this video, I'm going to share 7 editing techniques within Premiere Pro that will help you be more efficient editing your documentary film. These are steps that I've used to help me take overwhelming amounts of footage and create documentary films for outlets such as National Geographic, Business Insider, Washington Post, The Atlantic, and more. The first thing that you need to do is dial in your workflow, bins, and labeling. If you're just making a sizzle reel for social media, maybe you can just throw all your clips and graphics and music into one folder, drag that into your Premiere project, and find everything you need. But when it comes to creating a long-form documentary, that is just not gonna fly. In documentary, workflow is life or death. That's because with the amount of footage we're working with on documentaries and the amount of time it takes to work on these projects, if we're not organized, it's game over. I've heard from countless documentary filmmakers over the years that they're fired up about their story, filmed all this footage, only to get overwhelmed and quit once they get into the edit. One of the reasons this happens is because filmmakers don't invest the time up front to get their organization dialed at the beginning of their project. And from there, it's just a slippery slope. So I'm going to offer up a system that I've been using to help get you started. I'm not saying this organization system covers everything. It's a system that would have to expand based on the challenge of a particular film you're working on, but I think it's a great place to start. So let's jump into the demo. All right, so here is my folder system. Let's walk you through it right now, and then this will all be able for you to download through the link in the description. So we start off with a project folder. All of these have numbers so that they're always in the same order whenever I open this folder. If we drop down project, we have Premiere, which is usually, all I'm working with. But I also have project folders if I'm booting up anything like Adobe After Effects, Adobe Audition, DaVinci Resolve, Lightroom, anything like that related to the project. I can save them in here. Go down to number 1. So here is where I will put all of the video clips that I'm gathering in the field. So for things like this YouTube channel or social media promotion later in the documentary process, I'll put behind the scenes clips that I take with my phone. It can drop in there. We have client assets. So if I'm working with a particular client and they pass off footage to me to use, I'll use it right there. High res is essentially where I'll put all of my original footage that I filmed in the field. And then usually what I'll do is within the high res folder, I will label the shoot based on the date. Potentially, I'll also say like what I was filming that day. That's really up to you, your organizational style. The only thing I would say is that anytime that I'm putting something with a date in that folder, I'm always starting the date with the year so that over the time of a documentary project, which can take years, you don't start getting jumbled with like months and days first. It always comes year and then month and then date. Jumping down in here, prototype. Occasionally when I'm working on documentary projects, I will take prototype footage. So this is essentially like scratch footage, maybe footage that I've taken on my cell phone at a location to do a location scout or to make like a little prototype of a scene just with like a GoPro or phone, and I'll put it in here if it's not like the high resolution clips. Proxies are low resolution clips that are used for editing, which I'll get into later in this video. Then we have screen captures if I'm doing anything with screen captures, and then stock footage. Again, for most of my documentaries, I'm not really using stock footage, but you could also change this if you're using archival footage. Potentially you could put archival right here. But that is what we have in clips. If we move down to audio, I have D sound and ND sound. So this stands for diegetic sound and non-diegetic sound. So diegetic sound is any sound that I'm capturing in the field that could be used, pulled into the edit. So for example, right now I'm working on a couple projects that are filmed at animal sanctuaries. So occasionally what I'll do is just set up my audio recorder here and I'll just gather ambient sound of the sanctuary just so I have like a sound bed in case I need it in the edit, and I'll go and put that right in here in diegetic sound. Non-diegetic sound are things like sound effects or voiceover. So these are sounds that were not captured in the field. So SFX here, sound effects, could be something that I pulled off the internet or something I pulled off a stock sound effect library that I'm using for the piece. And then voiceover, if I'm doing narration, voiceover, anything like that for the documentary, I'll put voiceover clips in here. Going down to music, pretty self-explanatory, all your music. Then we have graphics, we have images. I use this if I'm taking images from someone's childhood to put during a sequence in the documentary when we're talking about their past. I'll just drop them in here. Documents is anything that I will use that are essentially text files, Google Docs, things like that I need to save. So this will look like potentially contracts if I'm working with contractors. It will look like release forms, either location release forms or individual release forms for people on camera. All the things will happen in that documents folder. And then in deliverables, I have high resolution deliverables, which are pretty much my final drafts that I'm going to be submitting. Prototypes are where I put like draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. I like to put that in the prototype folder because for me, as someone who has a design background in education, I love thinking of things as prototypes. They're rough, they're drafts. It makes it less precious to just drop and export into the prototypes folder. And then social media are for any social media promotions or reels or things like that might come out of this. All right, so that's my folder template. Feel free to steal it. The second technique to help you speed up your documentary edits is to create proxy files. Proxy files are essentially duplicated copies of the raw video files that are used during post-production. They are smaller in size and lower in resolution than the original video file, which makes them easier to load and edit. This allows for more efficient and faster video editing and rendering. Then when you finish your edit and go to export your film, the original high quality files are used to render the final video. Using proxy files was a lesson that took me way too long to learn. Back in 2018, when I was editing a documentary on maternal health care in sub-Saharan Africa for National Geographic, I was getting endlessly frustrated by my slow rendering speeds. I kept thinking to myself, I guess I just need a new computer. And I probably did need a new computer, but I was also just being naive to not create and edit off proxy files. The top documentary filmmakers in the game are using proxy files as their main editing source. I've seen it myself. Here's the exact language given to assistant editors on the Hulu series that I worked on as a cinematographer called Dear Santa. The editors are told to, quote, make 19 by 1080 ProRes proxy files in Edit Ready or Media Encoder. Do not bring 4K files into Premiere. Please write proxies to one folder per shoot day per city, i.e. all footage from 12/1/2021 Chicago goes into a 12/1/2021 Chicago proxy folder. So what does that mean in a practical sense? Let's jump back into Premiere and I will show you how I make proxy files. So there are a couple ways to create proxy files that I use. The first is a way to make proxies where automatically when you bring footage into Premiere automatically starts the process of creating those proxies. So what you'll do is you'll go up here to File, down to Project Settings, and then go to Ingest Settings. And then when that comes up, you will go to Action. You can go down to Create Proxies. Half in ProRes QuickTime Proxy that's a good way to go. Same as project, you can either save them there, or if you're using the folder structure that I talked about earlier, which has a proxy folder, you'll choose location and you'll navigate to that proxy folder. I also will always turn this watermark on. So I'll always go with the proxy icon, which is helpful because when you toggle on and off proxies during your project, you'll be able to see when you are indeed using the low resolution file versus the raw one. So if we click OK here and then we import media, the files will import and then Media Encoder will then get booted up and it will start processing these files so that you now have proxy files. Once Media Encoder finishes up, now your files will have proxies connected to them, and you can use this icon right here, which is the toggle proxies icon, to turn that on and off. If you do not have the proxy icon down here in the bottom, you can just click on this button editor and it will be right here and you can kind of drag that on. So if you click on and off, you're gonna see down in this left-hand corner, that's the watermark I talked about, always liking to have on, off, on, off, on, off. So that is one way that I create proxies, but occasionally I don't want every file that I'm bringing into the project to immediately have a proxy created, in which case, if I have my footage down here that I've just imported, what I can do is I can click on however many of these video clips I want to make proxies of. Say I just want to make them of these two. I'll click on those two. I'll right click, go down to proxy, create proxies, and then I'll get this window again, half ProRes QuickTime proxy. Make sure that that proxy icon, and then, choose your specific location where you want those to go. So those are the two ways that I make proxies. The third technique that has helped me speed up my edits is to increase the surface area of my editing. There are a couple ways to do this. First, I'd encourage you to look into a larger monitor for your editing. If you are used to doing all of your editing on a 14 or 16-inch MacBook screen, you're gonna love having the extra real estate of a 27 or 32-inch monitor, something like that. I personally am using a 2020 iMac with a 27-inch screen, but there are a bunch of cheap monitors you can get out there. And it's one of those gear purchases that not a lot of filmmakers talk about because it doesn't have to do directly with production. However, it's a purchase that will make editing faster, more fun, and allow you to create more work. So in my mind, that means it's one of the best investments that you can make. Now, if you do have a second monitor, another way that I increase my editing surface area is to use multiple screens while editing. I'm currently editing a documentary about people who dedicate their lives to protecting chickens. Now, to create this story, I first built out a paper script from interview sound bites. Then I went in and started to build what's called a radio edit in Premiere. A radio edit is just the story flow with sound bites. There is no B-roll. So instead of having my script and editing timeline on one screen, flicking back and forth over and over again, I like to have my script on my laptop and Premiere on my iMac. That way I can decrease the transition times between programs and always see the big picture paper edit alongside my editing timeline. Moving on to our fourth editing technique, which is pulling selects. As documentary editors, it's our job to look through all of the footage given to us for any project. But let's be honest, it can be hard to keep track of what's usable and what's not when it gets buried in the editing process. Selects are basically any usable material from the raw footage that can be used in the final edit. Here is how I pull selects. All right, this is a scene that I edited this week. You are getting real-time looks at the projects and the strategies that I'm using to create my own documentaries. And if you want to go deeper on the selects process, just let me know in the comments because I can do way deeper dives. But essentially, in this example, I have this 15-second sequence that I wanted to choose B-roll for. So I'm going to play you the sequence without B-roll. And I brought this over from my main timeline where I had the full draft, the full radio edit of my documentary, and I knew I wanted to put B-roll over this little section. So here is the way it worked.
She would come in on her own time and take pictures of all of the chickens. Within a month, she created a bird ID guide. It was a photo of them, it had their number, their name, and then she even went in and drew silhouettes of all of their combs to show how they are all different.
So I had that section, but I hadn't chose my B-roll. I hadn't chose the way I was going to illustrate this section. Now, when we're pulling selects, really the idea is you want to get out of this window right here. This is a really not an efficient way to be scrubbing through footage and choosing footage. It's so easy for things to get lost when it's over here in this project panel. So essentially, I had a section that I knew I filmed B-roll for that matched that audio really well. Essentially, this animal caretaker at a sanctuary making this bird ID guide. So what I did was I pulled all of those clips and dragged them over here into my timeline. And I had about 15 or 20 minutes of clips right here. So then the way that I pull selects is I will watch through everything. And when I like something, I will just make a cut like this, and I will pull it up to a second layer, okay? So I've already done this process with this clip. You'll see all these second layers right there. Those are all the clips that I liked either visually or there was something said that I want to maintain that I like. This sequence, I already had the audio for, which I just played for you. So I just brought in all these clips and I knew exactly what I wanted to match to. So when I liked it, I'll, pull it to that second layer. Then what I'll do is I will usually copy all of this, right? And then I'll just drag it a little further down the timeline like that. And then what I can do is I can select this whole first row. So not choosing the ones on top, my selects, the ones I want to keep. I'll right click or use your shortcuts. I'll go to ripple delete, and that will essentially just leave me with my selects here. And then I can start looking at these selects all at once and choosing which to pull over to make into my eventual cut, which looks something like this.
She would come in on her own time and take pictures of all of the chickens.
Oh, a good bird.
Within a month, she created a bird ID guide. It was a photo of them, it had their number, their name, and then she even went in and drew silhouettes of all of their combs to show how they are all different.
So in that way, you're getting out of this project window with all these little thumbnails, and you're able to see things just by scrubbing like that and able to start picking up little things that you like and you want to make sure that you maintain. And so I can either bring my selects over here on the same timeline. Another thing sometimes I'll do is if we go over here into our project window, if we go bird ID guide for demo, that's what we're working on right here. Okay, so let's get rid of these right now. So what I could do is I could come over here into my project window. I could right click on this particular sequence I'm on. I could go duplicate, open that, and then again, do a little ripple delete and boom, that's what I have. So then I have kind of, I could name this bird ID selects, and then I could name like bird ID all clips. And then I can always come back if I want to find something that I don't have in my selects reel, but it's a way of kind of winnowing down the information. Let's jump into the fifth technique, which is using multiple timelines. This is also known as the pancake timeline. So in Premiere Pro, you are able to create custom workspaces where you can have any configuration of any window in any kind of layout you want. To use this technique, you can stack sequence timelines on top of each other like a pancake stack. With this flexibility, we can have our selects sequence right over our draft or a scene sequence and just pull parts down into the current draft we're using instead of flicking between the two sequences over and over and over again. All right, I'm gonna show you a demo of what I mean. All right, so this is how I use the pancake edit, and let's look at that scene that we just looked at for selects, okay? Just as an example. So say we have our selects right here, about a minute of clips to cover, let's say, our draft being the radio edit or all those interview clips.
She would come in on her own time and take pictures of all of the chickens. Within a month, she created a bird ID guide.
Okay, so that you've heard that now. Okay, now if I come over to my selects and I have to keep toggling between these two, say I'm like, okay, well, I like this clip right here. Then you have to kind of go through the process of like, okay, I'm going to copy that clip. Then I'm going to come over here and I'll paste it here and then drag it on here. Like it's just very tedious. And then you can keep having to go toggle back and forth between the two. So the pancake method looks like this. You'll take the selects reel, you'll left click and then you'll hold it and you'll bring it. You can kind of bring it anywhere in Premiere. The blue is where you're dropping it. And then you'll come right above where it currently is. You'll let go. And this is the pancake edit, which looks like having two timelines, one right above the next. And the great thing about this method is you can do away with the whole copy and paste thing. The great thing about this method is you can just drag the clip from above down below. You know? Like that. And that's the pancake timeline. The sixth technique is a bit nuanced, but once I figured this out, I enjoyed my editing experience a lot more. Have you ever had the experience in Premiere where you export your film and all of your colors seem washed out? It just doesn't look like the video you were seeing in your project window. Well, for years I was having that experience and it made my color correction process very tedious. But now I know a simple fix. So if you want your export colors to look just like the video in your Premiere project window, follow these steps. What you're gonna do is you're gonna go to File, then you're going to go down to Project Settings, and then you'll toggle on over to Color. And what you might see is that your color is set to 2.4 broadcast. Now, if you want them to look the same in QuickTime as they did in your timeline, I want you to scroll down to 1.96 QuickTime, click on that, and then there you go. Now your exports will look exactly like they do in QuickTime as they did in your timeline. All right, and technique 7 is to edit off a solid state drive. Editing off a solid state drive, or SSD, is important because it significantly speeds up the workflow by providing much faster read and write speeds compared to a spinning hard drive disk, leading to smoother playback during editing, quicker rendering times, and a more efficient overall editing experience, especially when dealing with large video files. These days, I have been using and editing off a 4 terabyte SSD called the Crucial X9 Pro. This is not sponsored. I've bought all of these so far with my own money. I'm just mentioning them because they are super small, ripping fast, and right in the price range of all the other SSDs. SSDs definitely tend to be more expensive than spinning hard drive disks, so if you want to save cash, here's what I'd recommend. Keep a fast SSD on hand for any project that you're currently editing. Then, when a project is complete, you can back everything up to some hard drive disks or spinning disks. Then you can wipe the SSD clean and load it up with the next project for editing. All right, I hope all these tips help spur you on in your next edit. If you're looking for tips on how to structure your story in that edit, here is a video that I made about 7 key steps for story structure that you can use to bring your documentary films to the next level. Go out and tell some stories.